I never told my daughter I'd bought back her grandfather's lumber mill. Thank God I kept my mouth shut. Because 2 weeks after she and her husband moved into my guest house to help me out, they walked into my kitchen with a lawyer and a stack of papers meant to put me in a home. Their confidence didn't survive the phone call I made right in front of them. Before I tell you how that call ended their scheme, tell me where you're watching from tonight. And if you believe family who forgets where they came from deserves to be reminded hard, hit subscribe. My name is Walter Grady. I'm 66. For 38 years, I ran Grady's Hardware on Route 9 outside Asheville, North Carolina. The store my father started with a hand-cranked cash register and a handshake for every customer. I sold it 8 months ago for a number that would have made my father sit down hard in his chair. Nobody in my family knows that number. To my daughter Denise and her husband Marcus, I was just an old man who used to smell like sawdust and WD-40, living alone in a house too big for him since her mother passed. What they didn't know was that I'd used part of that money to quietly buy back my father's old lumber mill in Madison County, the one the family lost in the recession of the '80s. My father worked himself into an early grave trying to save that mill. When the current owner, an old family friend, decided to retire and asked around before it ever hit a listing, I paid cash and told exactly nobody. Not my daughter, not my brother. 3 months ago, Denise called me crying. Marcus's construction business had collapsed, a bad partnership, lawsuits, the whole ugly mess, and they were about to lose their house. I didn't ask many questions. She's my only child. I told her to move into my guest house, free of charge, for as long as she needed. I even sat at my kitchen table helping Marcus fill out job applications. Readers pushed down my nose because that's what a father does. For 6 weeks, things were almost sweet. Denise cooked some nights. Marcus mowed my lawn unasked. I let myself believe, for the first time since my wife Carol died, that my house didn't feel so empty. Then last Tuesday, I came in from the garden and found them both at my kitchen table with a stranger in a gray suit, a leather folder open in front of him like he was selling insurance. "Dad, sit down," Denise said, in that careful, gentle voice people use right before they hurt you. "This is Gregory. He's a specialist in elder care planning." Marcus leaned in, elbows on the table Carol and I bought at a flea market in 1994. "Walter, we're worried sick about you out here alone. We found a nice community in Hendersonville. And Gregory can set up a living trust. The house transfers to us now, while you're still healthy enough to decide." Something cold settled behind my ribs. "You want me to sign my house over to you?" "While I'm sitting right here. It's just smart planning," Denise said, reaching for my hand. "Simpler for everyone." I understood exactly what she meant by *everyone. In the next room, my 9-year-old grandson sat on the couch with his headphones on, completely unaware his parents were trying to walk his grandfather out of the only home he had left. I thought of every Saturday I'd spent teaching that boy to use a hand plane the same way I'd taught his mother. "Denise," I said quietly, "is this your idea or his?" Marcus's jaw tightened. "Does it matter? We're trying to take care of you and you're making it sound like a crime." Gregory slid the papers across the table, tapping a yellow tab. "If you'll just sign here, we can get the transfer filed with the county this week." I looked at the cheap plastic pen sitting on the folder. I let my hand shake. I let my breathing go uneven, my shoulders sag, like something inside me had finally broken. Denise squeezed my hand tighter, and for one terrible second I saw relief in her eyes, relief that I wasn't going to fight her. "That's it, Dad," she whispered. "Just breathe." "We've got you." I reached for the pen. 6 months before she died, Carol sat me down on our back porch, oxygen tube under her nose, and told me she'd watched Denise change. Watched her flinch every time Marcus's business hit trouble. Watched how quickly she started talking about money instead of family. Carol held my hand the way Denise was holding it now, except her grip meant something else entirely. "If it ever comes down to it," she said, "find out the truth before you give them anything. Make them show you who they really are first," I promised her. I hated that promise the moment I made it, and I hated it more sitting at that table with a stranger's pen in my trembling hand, because it meant Carol had known. She'd seen this exact moment coming from her hospital bed, and some stubborn part of me had spent 6 months hoping she was wrong. She wasn't wrong. I signed. Small, shaky, nothing like the confident scrawl I'd put on 40 years of invoices. Gregory gathered the papers with the satisfied smile of a man who gets paid whether the deal is decent or rotten. Denise hugged me, and I let her, turning my face so she couldn't see my eyes were dry. "We're going to take such good care of you, Dad." "I know you will," I said, and I meant it in a way she couldn't understand yet. I told them I needed rest and went up to the bedroom Carol, and I had shared for 30 years. 20 minutes later, I heard a cork pop downstairs, then Marcus's laugh, easy in a way I hadn't heard in months. "To finally getting out from under this place," he said. "To Grandpa finally being someone else's problem," Denise said, and laughed with him. Whatever in me had still been hoping I was wrong about my daughter finally let go. The next morning, I called the one number in my phone I hadn't touched in 8 months. Roland Chen had handled every detail of the hardware store sale, and he was the only person besides me who knew about the mill. "Roland, it's Walter. I need you to do exactly what we discussed if it ever came to this." A pause, then his voice, calm the way lawyers get when they've been expecting bad news. "The living trust paperwork. Signed 8 months ago. Any document Gregory drew up transferring this house is going to have a fatal flaw, Walter. This house was never yours to transfer the way his paperwork describes. It's owned by an entity they don't know exists. Their document is worthless, they just don't know that yet." Something in my chest loosened. "So they think they own my house. They think they're one county filing away from it." I thought about Carol's hand on mine on that porch. I thought about my daughter's laugh through the floorboards, the relief in her voice at the idea of me becoming someone else's problem. "Let it play out," I said. "I want them to believe they've already won. I want them spending money that isn't theirs. And when they've built their whole future on a piece of paper that means nothing, I want to be standing there when it collapses. That's a hard road. Walter, I've walked harder ones." Over the next week, I played the part of a man slipping quietly into decline. I let Denise handle my mail. I let Marcus start talking to contractors about updating the place before it goes on the market, which told me everything about their real plan for the house I'd raised their family in. When Gregory came back with a second document authorizing them to access a portion of my investment accounts for transitional expenses, I signed that too with the same shaking hand. Roland had already quietly moved everything real, the mill, my retirement accounts, into a trust they didn't even know to look for. What they were about to access was a separate account, seeded with exactly $200,000. Enough rope, not enough to actually hurt me. They found it in 4 days. I watched it happen the way you watch weather roll in from a distance, from Denise's Instagram, which she'd forgotten I still followed under an old account with my middle name. A new SUV in the guest house driveway, Marcus grinning behind the wheel. A weekend in Charleston, oysters, a hotel balcony. A watch on his wrist I recognized from a jewelry commercial. New furniture arriving at what they'd started calling our house to friends online. The guest house I'd offered out of love, rebranded as a stepping stone. They burned through $200,000 in 11 days. On the 12th day, I drove up to Madison County alone for the first time since buying the mill back. I parked in the gravel lot my father used to park in and sat on the loading dock in the cold October air, drinking coffee. Looking at the mill I'd spent 8 months quietly restoring without a single member of my family, knowing it existed. I'd hired back 3 of the old mill workers, men in their 70s who remembered exactly what that place used to be before the banks took it. We weren't running it commercially anymore. I'd converted half the building into a woodworking apprenticeship for kids aging out of foster care. Kids who needed a trade and a reason to get up in the morning more than they needed another. Government program. Carol used to say real wealth wasn't what you kept. It was what you were willing to hand to someone who needed it more than you did. I'd finally learned how to listen to her. That same morning, Roland called, an edge in his voice I hadn't heard before. "Walter, they filed county paperwork this morning. They're trying to force the transfer, claiming you're non-responsive and citing cognitive decline as justification for an emergency filing." Something in me went very quiet and very cold. "They're saying I'm incompetent, in writing." To a county clerk. I looked out at the mill yard, the sign out front that read Grady and Sons Trade School *, a name I'd chosen because I hadn't entirely given up on the son I never had. Only the daughter who'd forgot what her own name used to mean. Roland set up a call. All of them Denise Marcus, their lawyer, tomorrow morning. Tell them I'm ready to finalize everything. Let them think they've won. One more time. The next morning I walked back through my own front door and found Denise, Marcus, and Gregory at my kitchen table again. Same folder, fresh papers. Denise looked up with an expression I hadn't seen since she was a little girl waiting to open a birthday present. Pure anticipation. No guilt anywhere in it. Dad, we're so glad you called. Gregory just needs your signature and then we can really start moving forward. I sat down slowly. I looked at the pen. Before I sign anything, I said, I want to make one phone call. I think you should both hear it. I set my phone on the table and dialed. It rang twice. Roland Chen. Roland, it's Walter. I'm sitting here with Denise, Marcus, and their attorney Gregory. I'd like you to explain what you told me 2 weeks ago about the ownership of this house and about the filing they submitted to the county yesterday claiming I'm not mentally competent. Silence at the table. Gregory's face went the color of old paper. Happy to, Roland said. Denise, Marcus, this house has been held in an irrevocable trust under Walter's sole control since March. No outside document, including anything your attorney drew up, has any legal authority over it. What you filed yesterday isn't just invalid, it's attempted fraud against a trust. And given that your filing describes your own father as cognitively incompetent while simultaneously asking him to sign financial documents, you've created a serious legal problem for yourselves. I'd also point out the $200,000 you spent over the past 2 weeks came from an account established to test your intentions, not to fund your lifestyle. Every transaction is documented. Marcus shot up so fast the chair scraped the floor. This is insane. You set us up. You set yourselves up, I said, and my voice came out steady, nothing like the trembling old man's voice I'd been giving them for 2 weeks. You let me believe you'd finally noticed me. I let you believe I hadn't noticed you at all. Denise's face had gone pale, her hand flat on the table like she needed something solid. Dad, please. We can explain we were scared. Marcus's business, we panicked. You didn't panic when you called me cognitively incompetent in a county filing, Denise. You calculated that. There's a difference. Gregory started stuffing papers back into his folder, hands unsteady. Mr. Grady, I want to be clear I was not made aware of any prior trust structure. I'll be reviewing my own liability going forward. You do that, I said. Roland will be in touch with your firm this week. I ended the call. The kitchen was silent except for the tick of the clock above the stove, the one Carol picked out at a hardware convention 30 years ago. Marcus grabbed his coat. This is unbelievable. You'd rather destroy your own family than let us help you. You weren't helping me, Marcus. You were burying me while I was still breathing. And you were doing it with my daughter's blessing. He looked at Denise, waiting for her to fight for him. She just sat there, tears running silently down her face. He shook his head and walked out. A minute later, I heard his SUV start, then gravel under tires as he left. Denise stayed in her chair. Neither of us spoke for a long time. I heard you and Marcus that night, I finally said. Through the floor, popping champagne, toasting to getting rid of me. She flinched like I'd struck her. Dad, I didn't mean. You meant every word, or you wouldn't have said it out loud in a house you thought would be empty of anything that could hurt you. She put her face in her hands. I sat there and watched my daughter cry at the table where I'd once taught her long division. And I felt the ache I imagine every father feels in that exact moment, the wish that things could be simple again. Twisted together with the certainty that simple would only mean letting her do this to me again in 5 years, or 10. What happens now? She asked quietly. Now you and Marcus figure out how to survive on what you actually have, instead of what you thought you could take from me. The guest house is yours through the end of the month. After that, you'll need other arrangements. You're kicking me out. I'm letting you go. The same way your mother let go of every illusion she had about people, long before I was ready to. I love you, Denise. I will always love you. But loving you does not mean handing you the rest of my life to spend however you please. I drove back up to Madison County that afternoon and sat on the porch of the old mill office as the sun went. Down behind the same ridge, my father used to watch from that exact spot 60 years earlier. I thought about Carol, about the promise I made her, about how right she'd been, and how much I wished, for both our sakes, that she hadn't been. I don't know if Denise and Marcus will ever recover from what they tried to do, or if they'll spend the rest of their lives blaming me instead of themselves. Roland tells me the fraud filing alone could mean real consequences for both of them. Consequences I chose not to soften. Because Carol taught me that protecting people from the truth about themselves isn't love. It's just a slower, quieter way of letting them destroy everything around them, including you. My grandson's college fund is still intact, untouched by any of this, because some things a father protects no matter what the parents do to each other. He doesn't know the details yet, and I intend to keep it that way as long as I can. Though I imagine one day he'll ask why his grandfather stopped inviting his parents to Sunday dinner. I still sit on that mill porch most evenings, coffee in hand, listening to the same river my father used to listen to. Watching young people who never had a real chance learn to build something with their hands, instead of tear, something down with them. Carol would have loved watching them work. I like to think she's the reason I finally understood what she was trying to teach me all those years, that the hardest, most loving thing a parent can do is stand perfectly still and let the truth do what kindness alone never could. If you've ever had to let the truth do the hard work that love couldn't, tell me about it below. I read every one. And if you believe family should never be handed more trust than they've earned, hit like and subscribe. I've got more stories like this one to tell you.